Shalom. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Scott with Beth Yeshua Messianic Synagogue in Fort Myers, Florida. Welcome to our podcast, our home podcast of this YouTube channel of this Torah teaching. We do these Torah teachings in the middle of the week usually, and provide them for your study and for your edification, such as it may be. Grateful that you've joined us here. Hopefully this is a blessing to you. If you would like to reach out to us and would like to contact us, you're welcome to comment in the comments below, or you will find my email address in the video description below. If you would like to join us for services, we are available and open for services Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. here in Fort Myers. Okay, let us begin this week. This week we are in Parshat Bo, with the 15th Parshat of the Torah. Bo, which means go, or in some places means come, from Shemot, from Exodus chapter 10 through Exodus chapter 13, verse 16. All right, just a little summary before we set off and talk about a couple things that I wanted to share with you this week. This Parshat is dealing with the 8th, 9th, and 10th plagues. The 10th plague, of course, is the plague of the firstborn. And then Adonai speaks of the beginning of your calendar. This is the first of your months for you. And then we're going to discuss the Passover lamb, the Pesach lamb, the 10th day to the 14th day. And you are to roast it over fire, and you are to eat it dressed and ready to leave. You are to celebrate and remember this perpetual regulation. Following that discussion, we speak of the 7-day feast, the 7-day feast of unleavened bread. No leaven is to be in your houses. You're not to eat any bread that is leavened, that has leavening in it. Then it speaks again of this Passover lamb, but now it's going to speak of the blood, which is spread on the doorposts of the house, on the lintel, on the doorposts and the overhead lintel. The hyssop leaves are used to spread this, and you're not to leave your house until morning. So you're going to go in and stay in there till morning. Children will ask questions, and you will answer. You to provide answers for your children. At midnight, we have the killing of the firstborn, and then the people took their dough before it became leavened, wrapped it up, and then we have a discussion of the time that Israel was in Egypt was 430 years to the day, is what the text says. It says, this night we keep a vigil. No foreigner is to eat of the Passover lamb. A slave who is circumcised may eat it. A traveler or a guest passing through the land may eat it. A hired servant, a traveler or passing guest may eat of it if they're circumcised. No hired servant may eat of it unless he's circumcised. If he does want to eat it and does want to become circumcised, he becomes one of our citizens. No one who is uncircumcised may eat of the Passover lamb. The same teaching applies to the citizen and the foreigner. So even a citizen of Israel must be circumcised in order to share in the Passover lamb. The firstborn belonging to Adonai, we have a discussion on this, and that Passover will be a sign to the future generations. And when your son in the future asks you, what is this? Why do you do this? You will say that Pharaoh was unwilling to let us go, that Adonai killed all the firstborn males of Egypt, firstborn humans and animals. So concludes, this discussion, this parshat here in the Torah, the 15th parsha, the 3rd parshat of Shemot, of Exodus. All right, a couple things I want to talk about in this passage to share with you. One of these is this verse 7 of chapter 10. Pharaoh's servants said to him in the Complete Jewish Version, Complete Jewish Bible by Stearns, how much longer must this fellow be a snare for us? Let the people go and worship Adonai their God. Don't you understand yet that Egypt is being destroyed? These are the servants of Pharaoh, who are speaking to him and saying, hey, look, maybe we need to call it quits on this battle that you're having with Moshe. We've got this this word here. How much longer must this fellow be a snare for us? This word snare or trap comes from lamochesh, which is lakosh, the Hebrew word. the Hebrew word, means a bait, lure, or a trap. Why would you call this a trap? How much longer must this fellow be a trap for us? Why are they referring to Moses as a trap? Moses provoked reactions in Pharaoh. The reaction was to not let the people go. How did Moses provoke this reaction in Pharaoh? Well, in a few cases we have examples where it seems to appear that Pharaoh is willing to let perhaps the people go, or at least maybe the fathers and husbands go, maybe not the women and children, and maybe not the flocks, so on and so on and so forth. But the reaction to this was for Moses to respond, and somehow that response came across as a provocation, and then the Pharaoh would react in that way. So in this sense is what I say, that Moses was provoking a reaction. The reaction was to not let the people go. Moses was, in a sense, not negotiating in good faith. What is negotiation? Negotiation is always one side willing to compromise and give a little. That's what a negotiation is. A negotiation is basically an exercise in which both sides figure out where the other person will stop compromising, what the other person will give up. And if you find that you're willing to give up a certain bit and the other person's willing to give up, but that you can meet somewhere in the middle, then you've got a transaction. Moses wasn't negotiating in faith here, in good faith. He wasn't willing to compromise. In fact, he tended to escalate his demands and increase his demands. And this is what happens is that there's this provocation. It provokes, it offends the Pharaoh. And this is why the Pharaoh's servants said, how much longer must this fellow be a snare for us and a trap for us? He goes and increases his demands, and then we're left with trying to recover. Okay, what is the nature of this? The lesson is we should be submitting to Adonai in all of our days and all of our ways. Instead, we also tend to get tripped over or tripped up by offenses and by things like this. So the people are tripping over these increasing demands by Moshe, and in a sense, what it does is it creates the effect of hardening Pharaoh's heart. His heart gets hardened. It's like this. It's as if Pharaoh would say, I have a proclivity, I have a nature of a rebellious heart. I tend to be at odds with Adonai. I am provoked by the man of Adonai, that is Moses, and I am provoked to one of two options. I can either submit and repent, or I am provoked to further rebellion and further offense. And when offended, I refuse to submit. I get defensive. And we have this example in Proverbs 18. It is harder to win an offended brother than a strong city. Moses was upping the ante each time with Pharaoh. So this is the background. In this case, locusts are going to go over all the land. In the same way that Pharaoh spoke and stirred up the fear of the people against Israel, saying that the people of Israel were going to cover the land, that they will eat all your food. Just like that, Adonai is going to bring forth the locusts who are going to cover all the land and eat all the food. There's a question here, how much of this plague had a direct effect on the people of Israel? And I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. It doesn't seem to say unequivocally either way that this did or did not affect Israel. We know that the next plague does not affect Israel in a direct way, but this plague, we don't have a direct sort of statement on whether or not it affected, if there were locusts in the Israelite homes or not. All right, next plague is a plague of darkness. This would be the 9th plague. Let's talk about darkness and why darkness is so profound in this case. What happens in a primitive culture when you have darkness? Well, in a primitive culture, when you have darkness, of course, life slows down and stops. In our modern culture of technology, we overcome darkness with artificial lights, lamps, light bulbs, things like this. In history, the only way you had light was with fire. We now have light using electrical energy rather than radiation energy from fire. So what did people do in primitive cultures? They didn't do very much. And this is my question to you. If you were in a primitive culture and it became very dark, what would it be as if? It would be as if you were dead. It would be as if you had died. You don't see anyone. You don't go to work. You probably don't eat much because you can't see what you're eating. You probably don't even interact very much with your family. You probably just get very, very quiet. You stay at home. There's no reason to try to work around other people who are trying to work because you're all just going to be bumping into each other. But so basically they're not doing anything. It's as if they're dead. But consider that Israel had light in their homes. Notice the contrasting experience of the homes, where the lighted home, which should be a home of goodness, versus the home without any light in it, which would be the same as being in a tomb. It would be the same as being dead if there was just darkness everywhere. So very powerful moment here, this plague of darkness. Next we have the experience in their homes, and we have the instructions of conducting the Pesach meal in their home. So we go from, certainly the home life of the Egyptian in darkness, and then we're talking about the home life of the people of Israel because they have light, and then we have the last plague, and they're going to celebrate this plague in their homes. And in fact, it's the first plague that seems to provide a conditional sort of a set of conditions by which the Israelite is free from the consequence of this plague. Like in the last one, the Israelites didn't have to do anything. They didn't do anything, and they had light in their homes. But here, in order to not receive the consequence of the plague, the people of Israel are going to have to do some things. They're going to have to respond and act in certain ways. All right. So the Pesach meal is going to be conducted in the home and in the entrance to the home. So before we embark on the last plague, of course, we're going to do this. We're going to ask our neighbors for jewelry, which is a fascinating precedent and probably eventually lands itself towards having the gold and silver and gemstones for working on the Mishkan when it came time. All right, the plague of the firstborn. The firstborn was taken from any house that didn't have the blood of the lamb on the doorposts. There was a horrendous wailing from every single house, and of course not from the houses of Israel, provided they had the blood on the doorposts. But there was this horrendous wailing from every single house. Let me ask you a question. What would you have heard from the land of Goshen, from the Jewish communities in Egypt, when a baby boy was taken and hurled into the waters of the Nile River? What would you have heard? You would have heard a horrendous wailing. And so here, what the Torah is doing is reminding us of the judgment of Adonai, point for point, part for part, against the people of Egypt. And so it says this, that they would all bow down to Moses because he's a mighty man among them. And he went out from Pharaoh in anger prior to this plague, prior to the execution of this plague. And he says this on his way out. Adonai says to Moses, Pharaoh will not. Adonai says this to Moses: Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that still more of my wonders will be shown in the land of Egypt. And this is, we think of signs and wonders in terms of positives and blessings. We think of miraculous healings and provisions and things like that. But here is a wonder that is the wrath of Adonai. And a further understanding of this wonder, in my mind, has to do with the complexity of the plagues. It wasn't just like these were plagues designed to break their backs or break their spirit or break their morale or break their economic system, their banks. It was designed to give them a sense of the horror which they had inflicted upon Israel, and it was designed to give them an introduction to the Almighty God, the Elohim, who was going to judge them. So chapter 12, continuing on, begin your calendar this month. This is your birth month. Okay, what is this talking about? Many people think of the beginning of the new year, the Jewish calendar, being Rosh Hashanah, of course. And it is, and that's fine. But what's it's talking about here is like, for me, my birthday is in the month of April. So April is my birth month. It is the first of my months. That's what I believe Adonai is talking about here, that this month was going to be the beginning of the people's coming, as being born again as a new nation, being born as a new nation. And then the text in chapter 12 says, take your lamb or goat kid, your sheep or goat, one per household, combine households if you need to. So what's it talking about here? It's talking about hospitality, sharing with others, and sharing with each other, if necessary, in order to make this holiday or make this observance work across the community, that no one is left out effectively. And the other thing that I would say about this, let me see if I talked about this in my notes, which I don't see, but all right. So we think in our homes, especially here in Southwest Florida, in our homes, we think of stepping up to get into the home. And there's oftentimes a threshold where the front door seals against the outside, and that threshold is, you step over that threshold to get into the house proper. So you're standing outside the door on one level, you step over the threshold to get onto the other level, which is the interior of your house. All right, in the West, all of our thresholds are up. You step up to get in. In the ancient East, they would place the doors in a pocket, in a kind of depression in front of the door, so that the door would swing in this sort of depressional area. And when it says that you are to sacrifice this lamb in the doorway of your house, that the blood that was smeared on the doorposts on the sides and the lintel on the top, but there's another area of blood, and that is at the bottom, at the base of the door. It is this trough of blood. It is this flood of blood on the ground that came from the sacrificed lamb, the lamb who takes away the sin of the world, and it is by his blood as the atonement. And so they are to take this, and now you've got this blood, and it's like this blood is what washes your feet as you go in and out of the house. This blood of Yeshua, this blood of the Passover lamb, of course, which refers to Yeshua. And yeah, that's the essence of what's happening here. We have a sort of a birth moment. Everybody's going into the house. Nobody knows what's going to happen. We're waiting until the sunrise to see if there's going to be rejoicing or wailing. Why would there be wailing at the sunrise after going into your house all night? Why would there be wailing? Because there's a stillborn, there's a stillbirth. And why would there be rejoicing? There'd be rejoicing because another life has been brought into the world and everyone is healthy and sound. These are kind of the opposites of the birth experience. Even in our modern day, we still deal with stillborn and other tragedies that happen at the moment of birth. Okay, so that's what you do. You go in, and we have this recurring birth theme coming out of this, which is where we have this recurring birth theme where it's like coming out of the house at the end of the day. We waited around to see what would happen, and we're going to burst forth into life, into new life, into life without slavery, which is a born again moment. So you've got a born to born again moment here happening in this Passover sort of moment. All right. One last little point regarding this salvation that is provided in Yeshua. Behold the lamb who takes away the sin of the world. And then what was John referring to? It's the Passover lamb that is Yeshua. All right. Another point, just as a minor note, it's not enough that you eat of the lamb, but you must also paint the blood on your doorposts. You must also paint the blood on the doorway of your heart. It's not enough for you to take the Passover. You must also embrace and come to a personal space, personal encounter, if you will, with this King of Israel, this King, Melech HaMelechim, the King of Kings, Yeshua HaMashiach. So that's a little bit of discussion today, a little bit brief today. I was traveling this week, so I'm a little bit tight for time, but I wanted to get you something today and share a few comments and thoughts prior to your Erev Shabbat meal. May Adonai bless you this evening. May he give you a good Shabbat. And if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me. Would love to discuss any of these items with you further. May Adonai bless you and keep you this week in everything that you do. Shalom, shalom.